Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us late in the afternoon. We're pushing through to the end, so I appreciate your fortitude. This is our panel on career readiness and workforce readiness in middle school and high school. We are excited to have our esteemed group of panelists here talking about the great work that they're doing. I'm Julie Lammers from American Student Assistance. ASA is a national nonprofit focused on changing the way young people learn about career and navigate a path to education and career success. And what we focus on at ASA really is how do we start at a much earlier age exposing young people to the working world, making sure that no later than middle school they have an opportunity to understand what they like, what they love, what the world will pay them for, and what the world needs. And really trying to focus young people on how do you find your purpose in the world, and then no later than high school, have exposure to career opportunities that allows you to explore some of that activity. And so our panelists with us are also very well aligned in their thinking and programming in this way. So I would love to go down the line and have each of you introduce yourselves and then tell us briefly how your programming and what you're trying to do aligns with this issue of career readiness at a younger age. So maybe Jodi, I'll start with you.
Awesome. So I'm Jodi Grant. I'm the Executive Director of the After School Alliance. And for those of you that don't know us, we have a very simple mission, which is that we want kids to have access to the best possible after school and summer programs, and we want every child to have access to those programs. So we work with over 25,000 after school programs. We have partnerships at the state level in all 50 states, and we work with every single national provider. And one of the reasons I am so excited to be here today is that kids spend 80% of their learning hours outside of school. So when you think of that huge opportunity, particularly when we think about after school for middle school, junior high, and high school, it is an incredible time for kids to learn about and be exposed to all sorts of workforce opportunities that can really lead to different careers for them.
Great, thanks. Ajit.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here. My name is Ajit. I'm the president and CEO of Flair Education. We are a programmatic provider that Jodi is wonderfully talking about. We provide a 36-month paid workforce experience for high school students in the greater Boston area. We primarily target verticals in the durable and growth industries, so technology, biotechnology, finance, consulting, real estate, things of that nature. And we're in our third year of operation, but we have about 100 students in our program this year, and then next year, our Cohort 3 program will have about 250 students. Going into the summer, we're thinking about and getting placements for about 100 students in these internship offerings that we work with employer partners on. So I'll pass the torch.
Denise.
Thanks. I'm Denise Cotton. I'm the Managing Director of Instructional Programming at the Center for Black Educator Development. It's an honor to be here, and it's something I'm super passionate about. If I've even worked other places before here, I'll create an internship for high school students because of how serious I am about it. Our mission at the center is to rebuild the black teacher pipeline, because we know that black teachers have been systemically pushed out of the profession. And so in terms of high school programming, we have in-school and after-school and summer programming that allows high school students to intern, as not even intern, be an apprentice, a paid apprentice, to work in schools with students, to be developed as teachers and introduce the teaching profession way earlier than after they've already received a bachelor's degree.
Hey everybody, I'm Frumin. Humbled to be here on the panel with all these distinguished educators and amongst all of you. I lead an organization called Uncommon Construction in New Orleans. We host an apprenticeship program for high school students. We take kids from different schools around the city. They're paid, and they earn school credit for building a house together. We sell the house and match their paychecks with a scholarship.
So very different models and very different ways of approaching this work. So Jodi, maybe I'll start with you as sort of an umbrella organization that looks at a lot of opportunity in this way, and a lot of providers that are doing excellent work. Why is the After School Alliance so committed to expanding these types of opportunities in particular? And why do you believe that out-of-school time providers are the perfect partner to do this?
So I think that if you look, and actually I would ask each of you to think about where you are today and how you got there and what inspired you. And I would say for most of us, a lot of that has to do with mentors and experiences we had outside the school day. There is a huge gap in what kids have opportunities and what kids don't. And we feel like that is absolutely essential for student success, for working parents, but also for our economic success as a country. So we have this rich opportunity in the after-school space to bring together a whole nother set of educators. Teachers that want to be there, about a third of the workforce, but you're going to hear about these extraordinary programs where we can bring in people from the community, whether it's community colleges, libraries, actual businesses, musicians, people that are in the theater, to work with kids' coding classes on things that they're passionate about, because we want to meet them where they are, and particularly with jobs and internships, and then use that to help them be successful citizens. So we really see this as a ecosystem, and it's an opportunity when they say, it takes a village, to have everybody working with those kids to really maximize their potential.
That's great. Ajit, talk a little bit more detail about how your village works. That you talk about this 36-year program. You are in early stages, but with great scale plans. So maybe talk a little bit more detail about what that looks like and what you hope to accomplish.
Yeah, happily. And no, I'll just piggyback off of this point because I think it's critical. So when you're building these experiences for students, we have a 36-month model, right? And we like that model because it allows us to work with 10th, 11th, and 12th graders and see that what we call capacity to aspire and develop. And I think this is the critical point, is that for students in this, in our demographic, which are oftentimes under-resourced youth, which need additional supports, we provide these wraparound supports in a very immersive way. It takes time to really build those mentorship relationships, that social capital, to build the foundational skills they need to be successful in the workforce, and ultimately to get them into these working opportunities where they can flex those skills and showcase, we call it their superpowers, but really it comes down to their core values and being in those spaces and immersing themselves in what they look like. And so I think it does take a village. And in our model, the way that village works is deeply investing in the way in which we interact with our employer partners, right? When we think about employer partners, we think about volunteerism. We think about getting them into our space. Brian Stevenson at the Equal Justice Initiative talks about this idea of the power of proximity. That is critical. You have to take employers and you have to take people in your community and put them in front of the students so that they can drive the impact, so that they can see what that impact actually looks like. And I think that's really where the power comes from in the community. And when people can do that together, when they can build that community, then it starts to feed back on itself. People start making introductions, employers start talking to other employers, and you can build that really powerful community-based solution that we all need, right? But that's one city, one locality at a time. I think we'll get into this, but the critical question is, how do you scale that? And so we have ideas, but I'm sure we all can talk about different ways in which we've kind of achieved that kind of scale, or thinking about that kind of scale.
Yeah, Aaron, let me ask you, because one of the biggest barriers to work-based learning opportunities tends to be the availability of opportunity, right? We know from some work that we have done, about 82% of young people want a work-based learning experience, only about 2% have completed one, right? So there is a huge opportunity gap for people, and employer participation is a huge piece of that. In your field in particular, where safety is a concern, liability issues are a challenge, transportation is likely an issue, how have you overcome some of those major hurdles to ensure that you can provide young people a high-quality experience?
Yeah, the first answer is really good insurance. We have some really, really good insurance policies at Uncommon Construction.
Happy to share, I'm
yeah,
sure.
totally. We have an agent if anyone needs a reference or referral. So thanks for asking that question. So I think actually a misstep in seeking to get more work-based learning, real-world experience for young people while they're in middle or high school is by shifting the burden of hosting that on to those employers, right? You're asking these content area experts to become learning process experts, right? They might have new employee training protocols and HR systems and so on, but they're not experts in like young people learning, facilitation, delegating, what we say chunk, don't choke, right, in our environment. And so it's actually like misplacing that expectation on the employer partners, right? And in some ways asking too much of them and asking too much of them to do things that they're just not good at, right? But because we have to be deferential to them because of philanthropy or sponsorships or blah, 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 right? Like we don't name it in that way. So what we do at Uncommon Construction is try and promote these mutually beneficial relationships between our organization and these employer industry partners. Not every industry partner is an employer partner, right? So we ask 5 things of the industry, and we try and make it really easy for them to do it. One way that we position ourselves at the intersection of young people and their potential future employers is by being a really similar business as those employers. So there's, through one lens, we're like a supplemental course academy or like a internship provider or whatever. But through another lens, we're just a licensed and insured general contractor in New Orleans, running a business, and we happen to hire teenagers as seasonal employees 3 times a year, right? And so we lean on this idea of process as program. And then we create these meaningful intersections where we can either have paid partnerships where sometimes we're paying the industry partner for a service that they provide, like architectural services, so that they can collaboratively design the houses that our young people are going to build, because that process of architectural design is a cost of goods sold, right? So we have a process where we need to get building permits and design a house. Well, let's just have our young people or all of our employees participate in that process, right? So we can activate all these different business functions in ways that, again, are mutually beneficial. Maybe we get a discount because of a social media post or put your name on a t-shirt or whatever. But we're really working like hand in glove together. And obviously, there's donate and sponsor and employ, and there's these specific 5 actions, but it really starts from sharing in this collaborative work together instead of us begging them to come to a seat at the table that they may not be in the best position to sit at the head of that table.
Right. And so it's an interesting model that you've set up, but how do you then help young people translate from an education standpoint what it is that they have learned, what are the skills that they're building? It's not just that they just received a paycheck and were exposed to this great opportunity, but they then need to be able to articulate to an outside world, these are the skills that I now have. How do you, as an education provider, then work with young people to do that?
Yeah, so in your first semester with Uncommon, you make a LinkedIn profile, right? And you put Uncommon as your employer on your LinkedIn profile. On Wednesday this week, we have a hiring fair where we've got 40 companies coming out to our space to meet 20 kids. So kids are outnumbered 2 to 1 by opportunities that exist in our community for them, right? And all these people are elbowing each other out just to talk to our teenagers because the need is so great, right? So there's that. There's the nuts and bolts of LinkedIn profile, write your resume, those kinds of things. We don't do credentials. So in the groundswell of credentialism and all this kind of stuff.
You're not one of the million?
We're not. Yeah, we're not doing that. We've totally dismissed. We think they're great, right? It's just maybe not the right time while a young person is still exploring and gaining experience, right? So we hang our hard hat, so to speak, on the development and demonstration of soft skills. And so every month with your paycheck, our young people receive what's called a hireability scorecard. And this is, a performance evaluation that they're getting, but it's really strengths-based, and we didn't create it. It's a third-party evaluation tool. And then that feeds into our culture. We have badges on our hard hats, and we do shout-outs and lots of high fives, because we don't really get opportunities as adults or anybody to really say, when you're in a job interview, what are some of your strengths and weaknesses, right? We misrepresent our weaknesses as strengths because we expect to get tested on those. So we really try and take the wind, deflate that a little bit at Uncommon by having growth mindset-based conversations around your performance with respect to these transferable soft skills. Mm-hmm. Because the technical skills are going to come from 100 hours or so per semester on a job site, right? And the house is going to get built, and we take pictures of it, and it sells or it doesn't sell, and you can see the work that they've done, right? It's how we talk about these other things that we want to make sure we're finding frequent opportunities to do in our program.
That's great. Denise, let me turn to you for a second. So your organization, Center for Black Educator Development, is really trying to solve the dual problem of a huge teacher pipeline issue, as well as ensuring young people have the skills they need to be successful and thrive in an education profession. So what does your apprenticeship model look like? Why is that the focus of what you choose to do to solve both of these problems?
So there's two elements to our apprenticeship program. We have our in-school program that comes by our LeCount Cato curriculum that we implement in the high schools. It's called Liberation Teaching Academy. And it's a 4-year program, and that 9th and 10th grade really focuses on the history and really wanting black high school students to identify the fact that education is a tool for social justice. Because especially if you're going to encourage someone to go into the teaching profession, it's not the profession that's necessarily going to come with all of the glitz and maybe the salary, which we are fighting on a policy and to change. It has to come from a love for your community and understanding that this is a way to impact that. So 9th and 10th grade is where we really focus on, again, the history and aligning that with the English and the history courses that they're doing. Then they go into 11th and 12th grade where they start to do an apprenticeship. They're really looking at the art of teaching. This is where also, people think you can just throw someone into a classroom without doing an apprenticeship, without taking the time to learn. And that's where the joy of teaching and the joy of learning come from. So what we have is we've built out core competencies that the high school students are learning. What we're also building right now is a CTE component where they would be able to graduate as a teaching assistant, as well as get credits for college as well. And then we also have created our own environment for the high school students to learn how to be teachers in our after school and our summer programming. And so we have black scholars that are learning from black high school apprentices that are also working with black college apprentices, which is intergenerational. Mm-hmm. So you're also almost recruiting in the elementary because they're seeing the impact of the high school students and the college students that are working with them. And the high school apprentices that we have also have their own coach, which is very important in terms of the mentorship and the relationship that it takes in order to develop them as teachers.
So what does your recruiting model look like? I'd love to understand the process that you go through to seek out opportunity for these students.
So there are elements of social media promotion, but I think what we found to be the most effective is that you have to go to the schools, you have to be in front. I see you nodding your head. You have to be with the students. And so we have regional supports because right now we're launching in Memphis, we're in New Jersey, as well as Philadelphia and Detroit. So in our regions, we really go and speak to young people to help them understand, again, the opportunity of this apprenticeship, but then also the impact that they're able to have through our programs. And again, it's a paid internship as well.
That's great. So a question for all of you, and Aaron, you touched on this a little bit. Work-based learning programs are really reliant on high-quality experiences from provided by an employer. So how do each of your programs tackle that employer engagement piece to ensure that young people are getting not just what we know of an internship from years ago of just going to get coffee, but actual learning experience that will further their economic mobility, their job skills, their social capital, all of those pieces that are necessary. So Ajit, maybe you can start with you.
Yeah, sure. So this is, I think, one of the most critical parts, and Aaron, you did touch upon it, and I think it's really important to understand, every employer is different. Every employer understands a value proposition to their business. And so in our verticals, primarily in tech and biotech, the value proposition today is very much aligned to the kind of diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives that many of these companies are undertaking. And I frankly think a lot of these initiatives are Band-Aid solutions. And so a lot of these companies are taking on these initiatives to figure out what can I do to really rectify some systemic barriers. And so you have to come at it from a position of thinking about, okay, if their value proposition is this, how am I delivering to that? And for us, at least, the way we really try to engage employers is, we were actually just talking about this before the panel, it's relational, right? It's kind of a sales job. And you have to be in front of the employer the same way you want the employer to be in front of your students and to really understand where your students are coming from. You have to assess that employer as they're in front of your students, see how they're behaving. You also have to assess the employer in your conversations, and you can ask some hard-hitting questions. What have you done to further diversity at your company? That's a question I classically ask all of our employers, and usually the second call, and it's very easy to tell when those employers don't know what they're talking about, right? Everyone in this room can tell that. And so there are a lot of these types of questions, and I think it's relational, like I said, that you have to just keep on asking them and understanding where is their mindset? And for us at least, in the FLAIR program, we are not about converting students into full-time employees. Like, we are working with high school students. Our idea is capacity to aspire. So we care about giving exposure, experiences, learning opportunities that help a student understand that they can be an amazing future worker when they want to make that choice. So with our employers, we pull up the red flag when someone's like, yeah, that intern would make a great full-time hire once they're done. Or we put up the red flag when they're like, well, you know, what is the value proposition actually to my company? You're just talking about an intern. They're not going to convert. And so when people say those types of things, we know we're not working with the right employer. When we're talking to learning and development or DEIB or other types of functions who are talking about, yeah, you know what, I think we're on this journey, but I think we could do this and really build an immersive experience for a student that benefits that student and gives them exposure to what they could do, and maybe is part job shadowing, part project opportunity, then you know you have the right fit. And so I'll be honest, I don't think there's an easy answer to this. I think it's just a lot of time spent with the employer. But you will find that there's a lot of people passionate about this who will spend that time, myself included.
She does a lot of time selling.
Yes, you can tell.
Selling to
you can tell.
Jodi, from the After School Alliance's perspective, you work, I mean, your providers have a large network of employers they work with. Is there something in particular from an alliance perspective you look at or you're trying to build partnership around when it comes to expansion of these opportunities?
So I think you know, one of the things we're trying to do at the After School Alliance as a national organization is to look at the best practices that you're hearing about now, the extraordinary things that are happening, and then share those best practices and seed them so that other communities can do that. And I do want to flag, because I mentioned before, there's a huge opportunity gap. When we're talking about all these programs, there are 25 million kids who want to be in these programs who don't have access. And I do want to give a shout out to a program we have with the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Labor, who are in this room, called Engage Every Student, where we're really trying to tap into some of the federal COVID dollars to create more opportunities for those kids. But I think our challenge, you know, the employers, all of us really needs to be locally driven, because at a national level, I don't know the needs of those local employers. But I would say the other key voice is the voice of the kids themselves, because we find that when these kids, you know, junior high, high school, when they get to engage in real work, it makes all of their learning more relevant. They're that much more likely to stay in school and to graduate, and the skills they're learning are going to really help wherever they go. So I think our role is really to advocate to get more resources and more public and philanthropic resources into programs like this so that we can reach more kids.
Aaron or Denise, do you have anything to add to that employer engagement piece? And
Sure. Yeah, I can. We are the employer, right? So, like, you know, that's our kind of fast answer. There is like, how do we, you know, make it get employers to the table? Is like, we are the employer while they're engaging with us. Is anyone in the room like responsible at their organization for hiring? Right? Does anybody have a role to play in that? Right? So, like, when you're hiring a new person, or if someone chooses to leave your organization, there are those whom you're more likely to recommend, less likely to recommend. You may reach out to references and so on. Like, that's the role that we play, right? So when we look at our downstream partners, employers in the industry, whether a young person is college-bound after high school and is seeking a summer internship, or they're straight workforce after they graduate from high school, we're thinking about our like net promoter score for each individual student, and what is a good fit or match based on that student's articulated goals, because we are no longer the appropriate employer for where they are in their career trajectory, right? And we understand, like, I don't work for the same company that I worked for when I was 18 years old, and I'm sure most of the people in this room don't either. So especially in our industry, employees are kind of transient, that they get passed from company to company. But we remember the jobs that we worked on together, right? And so our high school apprentices might go on to work for Landis Construction, but they know Ryan Goody, general contractors, from a build day that they had at Uncommon, right? And so they can sort of navigate that space, and then we're sort of an ongoing like reference point for both of them. That same hiring fair that I mentioned will be attended by, yes, all of our apprentices who are enrolled in high school currently as part of their spring semester program experience. And it's an opportunity for re-engagement from our alumni to come in and see like, oh, I'm in between things. What's out there through Uncommon that I can tap into? And so it's also an opportunity for us to reconnect with a student who may have disengaged, or we might find an opportunity how we can help or whatever, right? So the fast answer while they're in our program is like, we just are the employer, so we play that role. So how do we talk to employers as we're talking to ourselves, right? But then it's about playing that role as a connector when it's time to do that.
And I think the important thing that you bring up there is what Denise mentioned earlier, that important of helping young people build that social capital, the strong career mentorship, the ability to navigate a social network, to have a support system there when they need it. Ajit, you built a lot of this into your programming as well. You talk a little bit about that sort of career mentorship piece in what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit, but this idea of immersion, right, from the student experience perspective. So one of the things our program really advocates for is there are 3 major short-term indicators that we look for. So we've talked about transferable skills, foundational skills. Obviously, in our program, it's a lot about financial literacy as well. So didn't get to this, but our mission is to tackle generational poverty, and that's kind of where the paid aspect of the 36-month cycle comes from. We are a stipended program, so we're not officially an employer of record, but we really do a lot to think with the students about that financial literacy component. But the last thing, which you mentioned, is social capital. And I think the parts of our program that are really focused on that is, like I said, the immersion around the volunteerism. So getting people into our space, that's critical. And I think it's very similar with Uncommon and your organization as well. It's getting people into your space where the students take time to build trust. Right? It takes us a lot of time to build trust with them. So as they build trust with us, bringing people into our space and then training them and helping them understand how they can contribute value to the students, that lets them meet the students where they're at, right? One of the things I was just having a discussion about this, it's fascinating. So there are a lot of universities that are reporting this. You know, with Gen Z, for example, how do we engage Gen Z, right? They're interested in activism, they're interested in this and that, but they're not engaging in the traditional ways our systems are built for. In my opinion, my personal opinion, I think that a lot of that has to do with their understanding of what the system looks like. And they want a more personalized system. They want something that speaks to them and a little bit about their values, which oftentimes are related to activism or related to impact. And so when we bring the students into our space, one of the things we tell our mentors first and foremost is the first session is just about questions, right? Don't expect the students to ask you questions. They don't yet know how to build that relationship with someone who's frankly very foreign and has not been to their community before, and they know it and is coming for the first time, right? So ask them questions, get to know them a little bit more. And then I think that starts to build that same feedback cycle I'm mentioning. So the short answer is I think it's just really about immersion. It's about getting people into your space, interacting with the students, and letting the students build trust with those people as they build trust with you as well as educators.
Yeah, Denise, I would imagine that career mentorship piece is so critical in the work that you do.
Yeah.
I know a reason why a lot of young people leave the profession. So how have you intentionally built that into the programs that?
So one of the things kind of similar to the question before, we are, for our programming, we are the employer. And what we're doing in our Freedom School Literacy Academies and our after-school programming and in our summer programming is we're creating the environment and the ecosystem that Black people, Black students, Black high school students, young people want to be in, while also preparing them for the world that they're going to enter. And in order to do that, you have to have a mentor. Also, one of the things that's been lost throughout the years is the honor of being a teacher. Mm-hmm. And I think when you have a mentor who's developing you in, like I said, that art of teaching, and you have someone to look up to, a lot of times no one maybe is looking at someone like them in the classroom who is inspiring them to want to be a teacher. So that's also a part of the mentor program. And then also being able to get feedback and work on areas of growth and being highlighted for the areas of strength that you had from someone who looks like you is so critical to the programming.
That's great. To shift for a minute, so a big ed tech audience, I'd love to understand from your perspective either technology innovations that you would like to see to make your programs more scalable, or that you are currently using to make them more scalable? I'm sure there are some here that would love to create solutions for you. So are there things that you would, are an area of struggle for you that I feel like you're holding you back? Or what is sort of your great hope when it comes to technology in this space?
This is something we've actually been working on for a long time, and it really, really came through during COVID. Because during COVID, it was the after-school providers, Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCAs, that were caring for the children of essential workers all day long. And that morphed into what we called community learning hubs, where many of the kids who could not learn at home for a variety of different reasons, they might have 4 kids sharing a bedroom, they might not have internet, we would get them to these community learning centers where they could do a combination of enrichment and virtual learning. And I think particularly for rural kids, the virtual learning connected to enrichment can be huge. And I just want to say, one of the things we're working on is, the examples are right here, of giving kids credit for some of the work they do in after school. And a perfect example could be types of technology, interaction with mentors, or we've seen a lot of foreign languages where that language isn't offered in a school, but a student can take it online, and then usually they can find somebody in the community to actually practice with the kid. So there's all sorts of really creative ways that you can individualize learning for a student by using technology to connect them to others. And I do want to say, I know we're just talking about this, but I want to flag that mentorship piece, because developmental relationships are so key to kids. And at least where my kids went to school, teachers have, like 30 kids in a class in middle school and high school, 6 different classes a day. It's hard for many of those kids to get those relationships. And in these kinds of programs, that's where those relationships can occur. And that's the #1 indicator for success for a kid. So really finding a place where they can have mentors, and mentors that come from their community, that understand the things they're dealing with, is really essential to all this. And I think, virtual can help with that too, if you're in a community that isn't a lot like your background.
Great. Aaron.
Yeah, I love a
Look very
technology
excited
question,
about this
from a guy on a construction site. So at Uncommon, our technology looks like a lot of different things through one lens, right? Like a hammer is a version of technology that just has remained the same because there's not a lot of room for improvement, right? So it does what it's needed to do, right? But we also utilize online HR software when we're hiring our students. So if you think about our curriculum as sort of like having 3 units, right? Like unit 1 is how to apply for a job and have an interview and get a job, but you just learn it by doing those things. And then unit 2 is how to perform in your job on a construction site. Unit 3 is how to get your next job, right? So we look a lot to if we think about technology strictly as 21st century versions of technology, computer-based or whatever, our young people are filling out Google form applications to apply for jobs at Uncommon Construction. They're doing their W-2 employment paperwork in gusto.com. We partner with Procore, which is like Microsoft Word for the construction industry. So every kid can have a login to the industry standard tool. So I'm probably not gonna buy your construction curriculum app because we're just using what's out there, right? And we're using industry standard because the process can be our program, and then our students are just getting exposure to Procore in the same way they would Microsoft Word, right? And so in that way, what it means to be uncommon, as opposed to doing the NCCER digital learning curriculum, where you watch a video about setting up a ladder and then take a quiz on setting up a ladder, right? In Uncommon,
is there a quiz about
there's an exit ticket, yeah.
Okay, all right. I learned something new today.
But in our space, you're just using a ladder all day, right? And that's the kind of industry standard practical application of whatever the version of technology is that distinguishes our young people from others when they're applying for their jobs and being seen in the broader field, right? So that's kind of our thinking on technology, from Wi-Fi hotspots to hammers to, software platforms and such.
Denise, is there particular technology that would help you scale your program or make your program work
What
better?
comes to mind is more so being able to measure impact, especially when you're talking about high school internship or apprenticeship, being able to track where they end up in their careers and how that goes, because our program goes until someone gets into the classroom. So we stay with them into our professional learning services. But I think for all of us who have touch points with young people, if we had better technology or a way to track where our touch points lead them, that usually comes up programmatically and data-wise, hard to measure that impact in a long-term way.
Yeah, I mean, how do each of your programs measure your impact? What is the ultimate impact measure that you're looking towards?
We look at a lot of things. We measure a lot of stuff, formative and summative. And when we think about our goals and outcomes and what we want to see, our versions of success, right? We're really preparing young people for success in work and life, right? So to us, whether you're college or workforce after you graduate from high school, that means, stable, good paying job, a little bit of spare money, you can go on vacation, that kind of stuff, right? The way that we get there is how we measure. So we're looking at post-secondary outcomes, as simple as like hours worked, dollars earned, right? Your attendance in our program determines whether we match your earnings with our equity award scholarship. So if you make 85% attendance, then we match 50 cents on the dollar. And then we're looking at what are you using your equity award scholarship for after you graduate. Along the way, we're using those higher ability scorecards as formative assessments, as indicators of whether we're gonna have that successful transition. And then, it's a lot of individual stories, and the one that I like to tell the most is a founding apprentice, Hunter, who started in our program our very first year, used his equity award to pay his union dues at the electrical union. When he graduated from high school, he just turned out as a journeyman. He's like 23, something like that. He wants to take his electrical card, his journeyman card, to be able to travel and go see the rest of the country. More important than that, I mentioned this kid's like 23 kid. He bought a house at 19. Right? So we think about like how you measure success. Hunter is a journeyman in the truest sense of the word, right? Like he has the confidence, he's earned it, and the skills to back it up, to be able to go and make of his life what he wants, and like know that he can earn a wage and find stability and success for himself and his family. And that's an anecdote, right? But we're looking at that, and the data can tell us. We measure it in Salesforce if anyone's interested, but yeah.
That's great. Ajit, Denise, you have other thoughts?
So we're measuring two things mostly in our high school apprentices, is mindset shift, an increase in the desire to be a teacher. That's one of the key things that we're looking at, as well as, again, there's 10 competencies of what it means to be a proficient teaching assistant going into that field if you're leaving high school. And so we have a rubric where we're able to really see their growth in those 10 areas of competency of teaching. And so when we look at that, we're able to see their development.
That's great. Ajit, what will you be looking
Yeah, the only thing I'll add, I completely agree with all these indicators and these outcomes. So, our mission is to tackle generational poverty. So our blanket goal is to have, by the age of 30, every one of our students at least in some form of employment or consistent employment in a job that makes about $60,000 a year. So that's where we kind of target, especially because we're in these durable industries and growth industries like biotech and tech. The thing I'll just say on top of that is, one of our core values is transformative. So we want all of our students to be transformative. We think that's something that's critical to this next generation. There are massive hurdles that they are going to have to face globally when it comes to climate, when it comes to policy. And so that's also something we really look for, is how are students internalizing that ability to transform the world? Because I think that, again, we talk about meeting Gen Z where they're at, and I think Gen Z wants to have a outsized impact on the problems of tomorrow. And so that's another thing that I think is really, really important.
That's really great. Jodi, from an Alliance perspective, not necessarily particular program outcomes, but maybe policy outcomes that you're looking towards to try to achieve.
So I would love to see more policy outcomes that are much broader than just test scores. I think we're still, very outdated on that, and that really embrace opportunities for kids to do project-based learning and make it easier for them to do things like these kinds of programs to get credit and graduate.
Wonderful. So in the few seconds that we've got left, I'd love for you all to share where everyone can find you and more information about your program. So I don't think we didn't hit that at the beginning. So
Yeah, I'll be standing over here after the panel.
Host the panel, Aaron.
Uncommonconstruction.org. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, less on Twitter. I would love to connect.
We're the centerforblacked.org, and we're also on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. So the website will lead you to all the other social media platforms. Yes.
Same here, flareeducation.org, but I will also be standing over there, so happy to meet anyone interested in our program.
Yeah, afterschoolalliance.org, and we are on all social media, and I'm going to stand with my colleagues over there.
I'm sure if you donate, we'll all be happy to put you on our newsletters.
100%. 100%.
There you go. There you go.
Excellent. Well, with that, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us today.